It was a cold, grey Thursday morning when Officer Dana Myers walked into the maximum security wing of Coldridge Prison. The air smelled like bleach and despair, just like it did every day. Dana had worked this job for 7 years, and though she told herself she was used to it, there were mornings like this when the silence felt too loud, and every locked door echoed something broken. She wasn't supposed to be assigned to death row today. Someone else had called in sick, and the rotation schedule had been shuffled. So when she saw the name Leon Carter scribbled on her shift log, her heart dipped. Everyone at Coldridge knew Leon's story. 23 years inside for armed robbery and the accidental death of a store clerk, a botched job, one he never denied. But what made him different was the way he held his head high, even behind the bars, like a man who'd made peace with his demons. Not many could say that in a place like this. Leon's execution was scheduled for Friday. Less than 2 days left. Dana didn't know why, but something about it made her chest feel tight. Maybe it was how he never begged, never cried, just sat in his cell writing letters and humming old jazz tunes. She'd passed him a few times over the years. He was polite, always said, "Thank you, Mom," and never gave the guards trouble. This morning she stopped outside his cell. He looked up from his tiny desk, where he was folding a piece of paper into a square. His beard had turned mostly grey, and his eyes, deep brown, full of quiet storms, met hers. "You're Myers, right?" he asked. His voice was rough but not unfriendly. "Yeah," she replied. "Temporary duty, just for today." He nodded slowly, then looked back at the paper. "That's fine. I was hoping someone would listen." She furrowed her brow. "Listen to what?" "My last wish," he said, as if he were ordering lunch. "Figured it was about time I ask." Dana leaned on the bars. "You want me to put in the request?" "There's protocol, you know." He smirked. "Nah, protocol can't help with this one." She folded her arms. "Then what do you need?" He looked her dead in the eyes, serious now. "I want to see her. Just once, before I go." "Her?" "My daughter." Dana blinked. "I didn't know you had a daughter." "Didn't exactly come up in conversation," he muttered. "She was 6 when I got locked up. Now she's 29. Last time I saw her, she was holding a teddy bear bigger than her." Dana didn't know what to say. There wasn't any policy about family visits this close to execution day, especially not for estranged relationships. And even if there was, convincing the prison warden would be like trying to talk down a loaded gun. "She ever visit?" Dana asked softly. Leon shook his head. "Never. Wrote to her a dozen times over the years. All came back unopened. Her mother made sure of that, I guess." "You think she'd even want to see you?" "I don't know," he said. "But I need to try, even if she walks away. I need to tell her I'm sorry, that I never stopped thinking about her." Dana stood there, unsure why this request was pulling at her like it was. She'd heard all kinds of sob stories over the years, manipulations, games, but something about Leon's voice, the rawness of it, didn't sound like a con. It sounded like a father staring down the last moments of his life and wishing he could fix just one thing. "I'll think about it," she said. He nodded again, then smiled faintly. "That's all I can ask." But what Dana didn't say, what she couldn't say, was that something deep in her gut had already made up its mind. She was going to find this daughter, whether it meant breaking rules or burning bridges. And that decision would change everything. The next morning, Dana woke up restless, the weight of Leon's request pressing against her chest like a loaded vest. She tried to shake it off, telling herself it wasn't her job to get involved. But every time she pictured his face, that quiet desperation behind his words haunted her like a ghost that wouldn't leave. She wasn't sure why it mattered so much. Maybe because she'd seen too many inmates die alone, holding regrets, like rosary beads. Or maybe because her own father had walked out when she was 5, and part of her still wondered what she would have done if he had asked for a chance to say sorry. She got to the prison early, parking her car far away from the guard tower just to buy herself a few minutes of calm. But there was no calm. There was only the ticking clock in her head, counting down the final hours of a man she barely knew, and yet couldn't ignore. By mid-morning, she pulled out her personal phone, breaking another rule. She searched through the prison's old records for emergency contacts, guardianship documents, anything. It took nearly an hour, but eventually, she found a name, Jasmine Carter. No listed number, but there was an address from 6 years ago in Detroit. It wasn't much, but it was something. She stared at the file for a long time. She knew what she was about to do wasn't just frowned upon. It could cost her the badge. And still, she couldn't stop herself. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was about giving a dying man a sliver of peace. By noon, Dana was in her car, engine running, with the address punched into the GPS. She'd taken the rest of the day off, called it a family emergency. The irony wasn't lost on her. The drive to Detroit was 2 hours of potholes and second-guessing. She rehearsed what she'd say 100 times. "I'm sorry to bother you, but your father's on death row and he wants to see you." No matter how she said it, it sounded insane. Who in their right mind would accept that? But she had to try. When she reached the address, her heart skipped. It wasn't a house. It was an apartment complex, run down, with cracked brick walls, and garbage bins overflowing on the sidewalk. She checked the name on the mailbox. J. Carter, Unit 302. Her hands trembled slightly as she climbed the stairs. She knocked twice, firm but not aggressive. A few seconds later, the door creaked open. The woman who stood behind it had tired eyes, a nose piercing, and hair tied back in a messy bun. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Maybe she worked night shifts. Maybe life had just been hard. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Jasmine Carter," Dana said, her voice softer than she expected. "Who's asking?" Dana hesitated, then pulled out her ID, flipping it open. "Officer Dana Myers, Coldridge State Prison." Instantly, Jasmine's eyes narrowed. Her guard shot up like iron bars. "No. Hell no. I don't want anything to do with that place. I'm not here to drag you into anything. I just need a minute." "You cops think you can show up after decades and stir shit up?" she snapped, stepping back a little but keeping her hand on the door. "He asked to see you," Dana said quietly. Silence, thick and cold. "Who?" Jasmine finally said, her voice shaky. "Your father, Leon Carter." Jasmine's eyes darkened. "He's not my father. My father died when I was 6. Dana felt the pain in those words. Not anger, pain, old pain. Like a scar that still burned sometimes. "I get it," Dana said gently. "You don't owe him anything. But he's got less than 24 hours left, and all he asked for was to see you, just once. He doesn't want forgiveness. He wants to say something before he goes." Jasmine looked away, her jaw clenched. "He killed a man," she whispered. "My mum told me everything, said he chose that life over me." "I don't know the full story," Dana admitted, "but I know he never stopped thinking about you. And I know what regret looks like. He's drowning in it." For a long moment, Jasmine didn't say a word, just stood there breathing hard, like she was holding back a flood. Finally, she whispered, "I don't even know what I'd say to him." "You don't have to say anything," Dana said. "Just let him see your face. Let him know you existed beyond that cell." More silence. Then Jasmine looked back at Dana and gave the smallest of nods. "When?" "Tonight." Back at Coldridge Prison, night fell hard and fast. The fluorescent lights inside flickered like dying stars, casting long shadows across the narrow corridors. Death Row was quiet, unusually so, like even the walls knew a life was about to end. Dana walked through the halls with Jasmine by her side, her civilian clothes and uncertain eyes catching glances from the other guards. Warden Taylor wasn't happy. He hadn't approved the visit. Technically, it wasn't allowed this close to an execution, and even Dana's badge barely gave her enough leeway to justify it. But she'd pulled every string she could, cashed, in favors, and begged for 20 minutes. No physical contact, no cameras, just one supervised visit. Taylor called it a mistake. Dana called it mercy. Leon sat in the visitation room, hands cuffed to the table. He didn't look up when the door opened. He was staring at the clock on the wall like he was trying to memorize the last few seconds of time. But the moment he heard footsteps, her footsteps, he raised his head. Jasmine froze. It had been 23 years since she'd last seen his face, but somehow something in his eyes still felt familiar. The shape of his jaw, the tilt of his head when he looked at her. That ghost of recognition cut through the years like a knife. Leon stared at her, wide-eyed, mouth parted slightly. For a moment he looked like a man seeing a miracle. "Jasmine," he said, breath catching. She didn't sit. Just stood there, arms crossed, defensive and shaking. "I can't believe you came," he said, voice cracking. "I almost didn't," she replied sharply. "I wouldn't have blamed you." They stood in the tense silence that only family estranged by time and tragedy can know. Jasmine finally stepped forward and sat down across from him, though she still kept her arms folded like armor. "I'm not here to forgive you," she said quickly. "Let's be clear about that." Leon nodded. "I'm not asking you to. I just wanted to hear what a man like you could possibly have to say before he dies." Dana stood in the corner, arms at her side, invisible but listening. Leon leaned forward as far as his cuffs would let him. "You were 6. I know you don't remember much. I missed your birthdays, your school dances, your pain, and every second of it burned. I tried to write, God knows I tried, but your mom, she was protecting me," Jasmine cut in, "from a murderer." "I didn't mean to kill that man," Leon said quietly. "I went in for money to help with rent. Stupid, desperate, wrong. But I never meant for anyone to die. The gun went off. I froze. I should have done time. I deserved that. But I never stopped loving you." Jasmine's lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. "You think saying sorry fixes anything?" she asked. "You think 20 minutes makes up for 23 years? "No," Leon whispered. "It doesn't fix a damn thing. But I needed you to hear it. I needed me to say it." Jasmine looked down at the table. Her hands were clenched in her lap, nails digging into her skin. "I used to wonder if you thought about me," she said, her voice softer now. "On birthdays, on Father's Day, every time I got into trouble, I wondered what you'd say." Leon nodded slowly, tears forming in his eyes. "I did. Every damn day." A long pause stretched between them. Then Jasmine whispered, "I hated you for a long time." "I hated me too." Dana felt her throat tighten. The room wasn't loud, but it felt deafening, full of words that had never been said and years that had never been lived. Finally, Jasmine reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It was old, worn around the edges, a picture of a little girl holding a giant teddy bear, smiling with 2 front teeth missing. Leon's breath caught. "Where'd you find that?" "It's the only photo we had. Mom threw the rest away." He stared at it like it was sacred. "I didn't come here to heal," Jasmine said. "But I think you deserve to see who I became, even if just for tonight." Leon looked up, tears rolling freely now. "Thank you," he said. Jasmine stood up, and so did Dana. "I've said what I came to say," she murmured. I hope whatever's next for you brings peace." As she walked toward the door, Leon called out gently, "You look just like your mother, but you've got my fire." Jasmine paused, just for a second, then walked away. Dana opened the door and followed her out, leaving Leon alone in the room with the photo pressed to his chest, like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart completely. The drive back to the city was mostly silent. Jasmine sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window while the highway lights flickered across her face. Dana didn't press her with questions or offer empty comfort. Sometimes the best thing to say was nothing at all. Jasmine finally broke the silence. "He looked smaller than I remembered." Dana nodded. "Prison does that to people. Time does too." They didn't speak much after that. When Dana dropped her off outside the apartment, Jasmine didn't ask for anything. She just got out, paused by the door, and turned to face her. "I don't know if I feel better," she said, "but I think I feel lighter." Dana smiled faintly. "That's something." Jasmine gave a small nod before walking inside and disappearing behind the cracked building walls. Dana sat in the car for a while, watching the shadows move across the lot. There was something in her chest she couldn't quite name. Not relief, not peace, but maybe a sense of something unfinished, finally turning the last page. The next morning came heavy with finality. The sun had barely risen when Dana returned to Coldridge. She wasn't scheduled to be on duty during the execution, but she needed to be there. She couldn't explain it to anyone, especially not to herself, but she needed to see it through. Inside the prison, the mood was somber. Even the guards, who usually joked to pass the time, spoke in low tones. Death row wasn't just a place today, it was a countdown. Leon sat quietly in his cell, already dressed in the plain beige uniform reserved for those who wouldn't be returning. When Dana arrived, he looked up and gave her a tired but warm smile. "She came," he said softly. Dana nodded. She did. Leon closed his eyes for a moment, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. "Thank you. You don't owe me that." "No," he said, voice rough now, "but I owe her everything." The chaplain arrived shortly after, along with the warden and a few officials. Dana wasn't sure if she was allowed to be there, but no one questioned her. She stood behind the glass in the observation room, arms folded, eyes locked on Leon as he was led into the execution chamber. He didn't resist, didn't flinch. He walked with the quiet dignity of a man who had finally laid down the weight he carried. The chamber was cold, sterile, the kind of place designed to be forgotten. As Leon was strapped onto the gurney, he turned his head slightly and glanced toward the glass window where Dana stood. Their eyes met. He mouthed, "Tell her. She saved me." Dana blinked hard, trying not to let emotion break through her professional stance. She gave him a single nod. The warden asked if he had any last words. Leon cleared his throat, his voice echoing over the intercom. "To my daughter, Jasmine. I'm sorry for every birthday I missed. I'm sorry for every lie I told myself about being a good man. I failed you. But I loved you, even when I didn't know how to show it. Go in peace because you let me see your face one more time. That's more than I ever deserved." The room was still, silent. The injection began. Leon closed his eyes. Within minutes, he was gone. Dana didn't move for a long time after they pronounced him dead. She just stared through the glass. At the empty gurney, the crumpled uniform left behind like the last layer of a story ending in silence. Later that evening, she drove to the nearest mailbox and slid an envelope inside. A letter she'd written to Jasmine. Inside was a folded photo of Leon, taken 15 years ago during a prison art exhibit, holding a charcoal drawing of a little girl in pigtails. "He kept this for years," Dana had written, "even when everything else was taken away." That night, Dana sat on her balcony alone, watching the stars. She wondered if Leon had found some version of peace, whatever that meant for a man who'd lost so much. She didn't believe in happy endings anymore, but she believed in something, a kind of closure that doesn't fix what's broken, but gently closes the door so the pain doesn't leak forever. 3 days after the execution, Coldridge Prison was back to its regular rhythm, the clank of steel doors, the shouts of inmates echoing off the walls, the guards walking the same, tired loops like human clocks. But for Dana, something had shifted. She didn't talk about it. Not with her colleagues, not with the warden, not even with herself. But the image of Leon's face, peaceful, not defiant, not afraid, stayed with her. In a place built on punishment, she had witnessed something rare, a man die with something like grace, and all it had taken was 20 minutes with a daughter he hadn't seen in over 2 decades. She sat at her desk, finishing reports, pretending everything was the same, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Jasmine. She hadn't heard from her since the visit. Dinah hadn't expected a thank you or closure. She just hoped Jasmine hadn't walked away with more pain than she came in with. Around noon, one of the guards handed Dana a sealed envelope. No return address, just her name, handwritten in. Neat, unfamiliar script. She opened it cautiously, heart ticking a little faster. Inside was a short letter. "Dana, I didn't know if I'd ever write you. I didn't know if I could, but I wanted to say this. I'm glad I went. I'm glad I saw him. I don't forgive everything. I'm not sure I ever will, but I don't hate him anymore. And that's something I didn't think I'd ever feel. I kept the photo you gave me. It's next to my window now. When I look at it, I don't see a criminal. I see a broken man who once held a little girl and didn't know how not to let the world take him away. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for seeing the good in him, even when I couldn't." Jasmine Dana folded the letter carefully, placing it in her drawer like it was something sacred. She exhaled slowly, letting the quiet soak in. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was honest, and maybe that counted for more. That evening she stopped by the prison chapel. She wasn't religious, hadn't been in years, but the space was quiet, the kind of silence that didn't feel heavy, just still. She sat in the back pew, staring at the stained glass window lit by the last of the day's sun, and for the first time in a long while she didn't feel numb, she felt present. Outside, the world kept spinning. Another man was booked that night for a robbery gone wrong. Another woman cried in the waiting area as her son was sentenced. The machine didn't stop, it never did. But tucked into the cracks of that system was a story no one else would ever know. About a dying man, a hardened officer, and a daughter, who came back just long enough to forgive herself, if not him. Later that week, Dana visited the prison's storage department. Inmate belongings were boxed and tagged after an execution, held for 30 days before being destroyed or claimed. Leon's box was small, 1 pair of shoes, 2 letters he never mailed, and a charcoal sketch of a little girl holding a teddy bear. Dana stared at it for a long time. She asked to keep the drawing. The clerk hesitated, looked at her badge, then nodded. Back at home, Dana framed it. She didn't know why. She just knew it belonged somewhere that felt human, real. Weeks passed, then months. Winter came and went. Sometimes Dana still thought about Leon, and when she did, she didn't think of the crime or the prison uniform or the steel gurney. She thought of the way his eyes lit up when Jasmine walked through the door. She thought of the photo clutched to his chest, and she thought of the fragile, flawed, heartbreaking way people tried, even in their final moments, to put something right. By the time spring rolled in, the snow had melted and with it some of the weight Dana had carried on her shoulders. But healing, if that's what this was, didn't mean peace. She still had nights where she woke up at 3 a.m. Her chest, tight with some feeling she couldn't name. Some memories weren't meant to be erased, only carried differently. She'd taken to walking in the early mornings before her shifts. Quiet neighborhoods, where old trees arched over sidewalks and the city hadn't yet stretched its arms. It cleared her head, gave her space to think without the constant noise of the prison eating at her thoughts. One morning, as the sun broke, over the rooftops her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A pause, then, "Hi, it's Jasmine." Dana's heart gave a quiet jump. She stepped off the sidewalk, pressing the phone tighter to her ear. "Hey," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Wasn't expecting to hear from you." "I know, sorry for calling out of nowhere," Jasmine replied, voice steady but softer than before. "I just needed to talk to someone who gets it." Dana leaned against a fence post, glancing up at the early morning sky. "Talk to me." There was a long silence. Then Jasmine said, "It's weird, isn't it? Knowing someone your whole life and not really knowing them at all." Dana nodded, though Jasmine couldn't see her. "It is. I went through the box you sent, the photo, the letter, the drawing. I cried," she said, her voice cracking a bit. "Not because I forgave him, but because for the first time I saw him as a man, not just the story my mom told me." Dana didn't say anything. She didn't need to. "I talked to my mom too," Jasmine continued. "She was mad at first, said I betrayed her by going to see him. But then she got quiet, said she remembered the day he left, said she could never look me in the eye after that because I had his damn smile." Dana smiled faintly. "You do. He said you had his fire too." A soft laugh came from the other. "End of the line. God, he would say that." There was another pause. Then Jasmine's voice dropped. "You think he really meant it, all that stuff he said, or was it just deathbed guilt?" Dana didn't answer right away. She looked down at her boots, caked in dried mud from the thawing ground. "I think he meant it," she said finally. I've seen men go to that room angry, numb, empty. He wasn't like that. He had peace because of you." Jasmine didn't respond. But Dana heard her breathing, slow, heavy, holding back something deep. "Can I ask you something?" Jasmine said finally. "Of course." "What do you do with the things people leave behind?" Dana thought about the sketch on her wall, the letter in her drawer, the faces she passed each day in Coldridge, ghosts walking in flesh, counting days that never added up to freedom. "You carry them," she said softly, "but you don't let them drown you." Jasmine was quiet. Then she whispered, "Thanks, Dana." "For what?" "For doing something you didn't have to. For seeing him when nobody else did." Dana blinked, caught off guard by the lump rising in her throat. "You're welcome." They hung up soon after, but Dana didn't move for a while. She just stood in the cool morning air, letting the silence wrap around her. Something inside her had shifted, and not just because of Leon. It was the reminder that in this world, cruel, broken, full of regret, there were still moments worth holding on to, moments where people showed up, faced the hard things, said the words that scared them most. And sometimes, even in places like death row, humanity found a way to shine through the cracks. Summer settled over the city like a slow burn, heavy air, hot pavement, and that familiar hum of life buzzing a little louder. At Coldridge, the heat made tempers short and the nights longer. But Dana, somehow, had found a strange sort of balance. Not peace, just balance. She still showed up every day, still walked the halls, still carried the keys and the weight of knowing how many men inside would never leave. But her eyes were sharper now, her silence more thoughtful. She paid attention in ways she hadn't before. Noticed the little things, a folded piece of paper passed between cells, a trembling hand during medication rounds, a man who hadn't spoken in weeks finally humming a tune under his breath, because Leon had changed her. Not in some grand, dramatic way, but in the small ways that mattered, the way you start to see people as more than their records, more than their mistakes. One humid Thursday afternoon, she was called to the intake room. A new prisoner had been transferred from another facility, a young man named Reggie Morrow, 21 years old, multiple counts of armed robbery, no deaths, no priors, first-timer, quiet, scared. Dana stood by as he was processed. He didn't speak, just kept his head down and answered questions with short, clipped words. But when the guards moved to shove him along, Dana stepped in. "I'll take it from here," she said, her voice calm but firm. The guards shrugged, handed her the intake sheet and walked off. She walked Reggie down the long corridor toward his assigned block. He kept stealing glances at her badge. "You always this quiet?" Dana asked without looking at him. He hesitated. "Ain't got much to say to cops." "Fair," she replied. A few steps later he asked, "You the one they talk about?" She turned slightly. "Depends. What are they saying?" "Some old heads said you helped a guy on death row find his daughter. Said you broke rules to do it." Dana gave a half smile. Guess rumors travel faster than truth. He looked at her, a flicker of something curious in his eyes. Did she come, the daughter? She did. And she left him with peace. Reggie nodded slowly, like that meant something to him. Maybe it did. When they reached his cell, she unlocked the door and let him step in. He paused before turning to her. "You think it's too late for someone like me?" Dana looked him in the eyes. "It's not about what you did. It's about what you do next." Reggie swallowed hard, then nodded once, the kind of nod that wasn't about understanding, but about hope. As she walked back down the hallway, the hum of the prison around her felt a little different, lighter, and that too was something she owed to Leon Carter. Later that night, she pulled out her personal journal, something she hadn't opened in years. She wrote slowly, carefully, like carving words into stone. "Today a young man asked me if it was too late for him. I told him no. I told him what I believed, not because I was trained to say it, but because I saw it. I saw a dying man die with dignity. I saw a daughter let go of hate, even if she didn't call it forgiveness. I saw how powerful it can be when one person, Just one chooses to show up. Maybe that's what redemption really is. Not undoing the past, just refusing to let it be the whole story. She closed the journal and placed it gently in her nightstand. The framed sketch of the little girl still sat on her shelf, quiet and soft in the moonlight. Sometimes Dana wondered if anyone else in that prison remembered Leon Carter. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. But she did. And as long as she remembered, he wasn't just a number. He wasn't just a sentence. He was a man who died trying to be something more, even if it came too late. The anniversary of Leon Carter's execution came and went without ceremony. There were no headlines, no public statements, just a date on a calendar that only Dana and maybe Jasmine remembered. The prison didn't mention it. There was no memorial, no sign he'd ever existed within those cold concrete walls. But memory is a strange thing. It doesn't need monuments to stay alive. Dana marked the day quietly. She took the day off. Work, for the first time in years without needing to fake an excuse. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She just drove, out of the city, away from the noise, down roads where trees arched overhead and the sun flickered through in golden streaks. She stopped at a small cemetery just outside a forgotten town. Leon hadn't been buried in a fancy graveyard. No family claimed his body. The state had handled the arrangements, which meant a plain wooden box, no service, no eulogy, just a name and a date on a brass plate. Leon Carter, 1969 to 2024. But Dana had tracked it down. She knelt in front of the modest headstone, brushing the dried leaves off its base. She didn't cry. She didn't speak right away. She just sat with him. The breeze was soft, the sky wide open above them. Finally, she pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket, one she had written but never sent. She read it aloud, her voice barely, above a whisper. You once said you weren't looking for forgiveness, just a moment of truth before the end. I think you found it. Not because you fixed everything, but because you tried. You made a choice in those final hours to face the things you ran from for years, and somehow that changed more than I thought it could. It changed me. It changed Jasmine. Maybe that's what redemption really is. Not getting it all right, but refusing to let it end in silence. You died with your eyes open, Leon, and because of that I keep mine open too. She folded the letter and tucked it under a small stone at the base of the grave. As she stood to leave, her phone buzzed. A text from Jasmine. I visited him last week. Didn't tell you because I wasn't sure I could go through with it, but I'm glad I did. Thank you again. You changed both our lives. Dana smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the lips but settles somewhere deeper, in the chest, where all the hurt and hope live side by side. She didn't reply. She just looked back at the grave one last time, gave a quiet nod and walked away. Back at home that night, Dana took the drawing down from her wall. She placed it in a box alongside the original photo Jasmine had returned to her weeks ago, the one with the teddy bear and missing teeth. On top of both, she placed one last note. He loved you. Even when the world told him he didn't deserve to, he never stopped. And then, for the first time in a long time, Dana slept, not out of exhaustion, but out of peace. Some stories don't end in fireworks. Some end in quiet forgiveness, in changed hearts, in whispered goodbyes that finally feel like enough, and sometimes that's all we ever really need.